The air was thick with smoke, and the ground shook with the sound of battle. Steel clashed against steel, and the cries of the wounded echoed through the fields outside Arden's gate. Among the chaos, Ethan Cole pushed forward, his sword heavy in his hands but his heart steady. He was not fighting for glory or reward. He was fighting for the kingdom, for the people who could not defend themselves. The enemy had broken through the outer defenses. Soldiers ran in every direction, some retreating, others holding the line. Ethan saw a group of enemy fighters forcing their way toward the royal carriage. His heart pounded harder when he realized who was inside. Queen Alara. If she fell, the kingdom would crumble. Without thinking, he charged. The battle around him blurred into noise and motion. He cut down one attacker, then another, his breath ragged. A soldier swung a blade toward the carriage door, but Ethan's sword blocked it just in time. He drove the enemy back, fighting until the last one lay on the ground, unmoving. He turned toward the carriage, his hands shaking as he pulled the door open. Inside, Queen Alara sat slumped, her pale face streaked with sweat. Blood stained her gown, spreading fast from a wound near her side. Her eyes met his for a moment, weak but full of silent fear. "Stay with me," he said softly, lifting her carefully. Her breathing was shallow, and each second felt like it might be her last. He carried her to a nearby tent where the medics were working on the wounded. They rushed forward, but after only a glance, one of them shook his head. "She's losing too much blood," the medic said. "We have nothing for her type. She will not last much longer." Ethan's heart pounded. He had seen death before, but this was different. The queen was more than a ruler. She was the symbol of hope for the people. Without her, the kingdom's strength would vanish. He clenched his fists and spoke before his mind could stop him. "I'm a universal donor," he said. "Take my blood." The medics hesitated. "It's dangerous. You're already wounded yourself." "I don't care. Do it now." They moved quickly. Ethan sat beside the queen as the medic connected the lines, felt the pull as his blood began to flow into her veins. Her hand rested lightly on his arm, not by choice, but from the way her body had been positioned. Still, he could feel the faint warmth of her skin. Minutes felt like hours. His vision blurred, and a cold sweat formed on his brow. But he kept his eyes on her face, willing her to live. Slowly, color returned to her cheeks. Her breathing grew steadier. She opened her eyes again and looked at him, confusion and gratitude mixing in her gaze. "You," she whispered, her voice weak. "Why?" "Because you are worth saving," he said. "And because without you, we are lost." Her lips curved faintly, almost a smile, before she closed her eyes again. The medics assured him she was stable for now. Ethan leaned back, exhausted, but relief washed over him. He did not know why, but something about her survival felt deeply personal, as if their fates had been tied together in that moment. The battle outside still raged. The walls shook from distant blasts, and shouts echoed through the tent. Ethan knew he could not stay here forever. Once the queen was safe, he would have to return to the fight. But for now, he stayed beside her, guarding her as though she were the last light in a dark world. One of the medics touched his shoulder. "You've given her a chance. She may recover fully." Ethan nodded, too tired to speak. He glanced at the queen again. She looked peaceful now, her breathing slow and steady. Something deep inside him told him that this moment would change everything. Saving her had not just been the right thing to do, it had been the only thing he could have done. Did not yet understand that the bond formed in these few minutes would alter the course of both their lives, and perhaps the future of the kingdom itself. Days passed since the battle at Arden's Gate. The capital had survived, but the air still carried the weight of fear. The streets were quiet, and people spoke in low voices. Inside the royal palace, Queen Alara rested in her chambers, her strength slowly returning. The wound had nearly taken her life, and she knew she owed her survival to one man. Ethan Cole had been summoned to the palace. He had never stepped foot inside its tall marble halls before. The scent of polished wood and burning candles was strange after the smoke and dust of the battlefield. Guards in gold and white armor lined the corridors, watching him with unreadable expressions. He was led into the audience chamber. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, painting the floor with long patterns. At the far end, Queen Alara sat on a throne draped with deep red cloth. She looked stronger now, but her eyes still held the tiredness of someone who had walked too close to death. "Ethan Cole," she said softly. Her voice carried through the hall, calm yet firm. "Step forward." He walked until he stood a few feet away. He bowed his head slightly. "I remember the battlefield," she said. "I remember your face, and I remember the choice you made. You gave me your blood when no one else could." "I only did what I had to," he replied. "You are our queen. Without you, the kingdom would have fallen." A faint smile touched her lips. Many would say such words, but few would risk their life to prove them. She paused, then added, "Since that day, I have felt something unusual, a sense of connection. At night, I see flashes, a river at sunset, a small wooden house in the hills, a boy holding a wooden sword. I believe these are your memories." Ethan froze. "I have seen things as well," he admitted. "A white balcony, the sound of music, a crown on a table beside an open window." The room was silent for a long moment. Neither fully understood what was happening, but both knew it was real. The transfusion had left behind more than life fit, had bound them in a way that could not be explained. The Queen's chief advisor, Lord Herrick, stepped forward. "Your Majesty, it is dangerous for a soldier to be tied so closely to the throne. People will talk. They will question your judgment." "Let them talk," Ilara said. "Ethan saved my life. It is all the truth I need." Still, Ethan could see the disapproval in the eyes of the nobles standing in the shadows of the hall. He knew many would rather see him gone than close to the Queen. He had no interest in power, but he also knew he could not simply walk away. Later, as he was leaving the chamber, a young palace servant hurried to him. Her name was Clara, and her voice trembled. "Sir, there is danger. I overheard men in the outer garden. They spoke of removing the Queen before she becomes too strong again." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Did you see who they were?"
"No, sir."
"They wore cloaks, but I heard one named Lord Brenner." Ethan thanked her and made his way out into the city streets. He could feel the Queen's presence faintly in his mind now, like a whisper in the distance. It was strange, but it gave him comfort. He knew he would not rest until she was safe. That night, he stood outside the palace walls, watching the torchlights flicker. The city seemed peaceful, but he could sense a storm building beneath the surface. Somewhere inside the palace, the Queen lay sleeping, unaware of how close the threat was. In his mind, a sudden image appeared: a dark corridor, footsteps approaching, and the sound of steel being drawn. He did not know if it was a dream or a warning, but he trusted it. The bond between them had already saved one life, might soon save another. Ethan turned away from the wall and vanished into the shadows. He had fought for the Queen once on the battlefield. Now he would fight for her in the silence between battles, against enemies who wore no uniforms and carried no banners. He would protect her, no matter what it cost. The night was cold, and a thin mist curled over the stone streets of the capital. Ethan Cole moved quietly through the narrow alleys, his boots silent on the damp ground. He had been following two cloaked figures since sunset. They moved with purpose, avoiding the main roads, speaking in low voices he could not fully hear. He kept his distance until they stopped near a side entrance to the palace. One of them produced a small key, and the heavy iron gate opened with barely a sound. Ethan's hand tightened around the hilt of his sword. Whoever they were, they had access to places only trusted servants or nobles could reach. He waited until they disappeared inside, then circled around to another entrance. The guards at the main gate recognized him and let him through without question. Inside, the palace was quiet, but Ethan could sense tension in the air. He passed through the long hallways, every step measured, every sound magnified by the silence of the hour. In his mind, a sudden image appeared: Queen Ilara standing at her balcony, turning her head as if she heard something behind her. A shadow moving close. He quickened his pace. The bond between them had grown stronger since the day of the battle, and though he could not explain it, he trusted what it showed him. When he reached the royal chambers, the guards posted outside looked calm. "All is well," one said. But Ethan did not believe it. He pushed the door open and stepped inside. The Queen stood near the balcony, just as he had seen in his mind. She turned, surprised. Ethan. What a figure leapt from the shadows, a blade flashing in the candlelight. Ethan moved before he could think, blocked the strike, forcing the attacker back. The man was quick and skilled, but Ethan's fury was greater. Steel rang against steel as they fought across the room. The queen stayed back, her eyes wide but steady. She knew this was no common thief. The man's movements were too precise, his strikes aimed to kill with a single blow. Ethan forced him toward the balcony, but the assassin kicked a chair into his path and darted toward the door. 2 guards tried to stop him, but he slipped past them and vanished into the halls. Breathing hard, Ethan turned back to the queen. "Are you hurt?" "No," she said, though her hands trembled. "I heard nothing until you came in." "I followed 2 men into the palace," Ethan said. "One of them was here tonight. Someone inside these walls is helping them." The queen's expression hardened. "Then we must find them before they strike again." Over the next days, Ethan searched the palace in secret. He spoke to servants, guards, and messengers, listening for small details that might reveal the traitors. At the same time, the queen used her authority to summon certain lords for questioning, though she revealed nothing of her suspicions. Late one evening, Clara, the young servant who had warned Ethan before, found him in the training yard. "I saw the man again," she whispered. He was speaking with Lord Brenner in the West Garden. Ethan's jaw tightened. Lord Brenner was powerful and respected, but he had long opposed the queen's decisions. If he was involved, the conspiracy was deeper than Ethan feared. That night, Ethan hid near the West Garden. He saw Brenner meet with the cloaked man, passing him a sealed letter. The exchange was quick, but it was enough. Ethan followed the cloaked man as he left the garden, tracking him through the dark streets beyond the palace walls. When the man reached a quiet house near the edge of the city, Ethan moved in. The fight was swift and brutal. Ethan struck him down and searched the body, finding the letter. Inside were orders to strike during the next royal council meeting, when the queen would be surrounded by her advisors and guards, many of whom could not be trusted. Ethan burned the letter after memorizing its contents. The enemy knew how to hide, but now he knew their plan. They would try again soon, and when they did, he would be ready. As he walked back toward the palace, he felt a faint echo in his mind, Dalera's voice, calm but determined. "We will face them together." The morning of the royal council meeting began like any other, but Ethan Cole felt the weight of danger in the air. The hallways of the palace were busy with servants carrying trays, scribes rushing with scrolls, and guards standing at their posts. Yet every face seemed tense, every movement too careful. He had memorized the plan he had found in the letter. Today, the traitors would strike. Queen Alara entered the Grand Council chamber, dressed in a simple gown of deep blue, her crown resting lightly on her head. She moved with calm dignity, though Ethan could feel her heartbeat in his own chest through the strange bond they shared. She knew what he knew. They were both ready. The council members gathered around the long table. Among them sat Lord Brenner, his expression unreadable. Ethan took his place against the wall, one hand resting on the hilt of his sword. His eyes moved constantly, watching every doorway and every guard. The meeting began with talk of rebuilding the outer cities after the siege, but Ethan could not focus on the words. He saw one guard shift his weight too often, his hand twitching near his belt. Another stood closer to the queen than necessary. Through the bond, a flash of warning filled his mind, a sudden image of steel flashing in the light. Without hesitation, he stepped forward just as the first attacker drew a blade. The man lunged for the queen, but Ethan intercepted the strike. The room erupted in chaos. More traitors revealed themselves. 2 council members drew daggers, while disguised soldiers blocked the exits. The sound of metal clashing filled the chamber. Ethan fought with precision, his movements fast and certain. The queen stood behind him, her voice strong as she called for loyal guards to stand their ground. One of the attackers rushed toward her, but Ethan saw it before it happened, and the bond between them was sharp now, almost like shared sight. He turned, struck the attacker down, and returned to face another. The fighting was close and brutal. Chairs shattered, scrolls scattered across the floor, and the council table became a barrier between the loyal and the traitors. Lord Brenner stepped forward, his own blade in hand. "The queen's time is over," he shouted. "She is weak, and this kingdom needs strength." "You mistake cruelty for strength," Alara said. Her voice was steady, even as she stood in the heart of the battle. "You mistake loyalty for weakness. That will be your downfall." Brenner charged, but Ethan met him head-on. Their swords clashed with a force that sent sparks flying. Brenner was strong, but Ethan had fought in more battles than the Lord had seen in his lifetime. Each strike pushed Brenner back, until with a final blow, Ethan disarmed him and sent his sword clattering to the floor. The remaining traitors faltered, seeing their leader defeated. Loyal guards surged forward, forcing the rest to surrender or flee. The chamber fell silent except for the heavy breathing of those who had fought. Ethan stood beside the queen, his chest rising and falling with each breath. She looked at him, her eyes filled with unspoken gratitude. He could feel it through the bond as clearly as if she had spoken the words aloud. When the bodies of the fallen were removed and the traitors were taken to the dungeons, Ilara addressed the few council members who remained. "Today was an attempt to steal the heart of this kingdom," she said. "But our heart still beats. It beats because of those who are willing to stand, even when surrounded." Ethan said nothing. He did not seek praise or recognition. He only knew that the danger was not yet gone. Enemies like Brenner did not act alone, and others might still be plotting in the shadows. That night, as the palace settled into uneasy quiet, Ethan walked the halls alone. The torches burned low, casting long shadows across the stone. In his mind, he felt the queen's presence once again, a silent echo of trust and determination. He stopped outside her chamber door. Inside, she was safe for now, guarded by loyal soldiers. But Ethan knew he would not rest. As long as she lived, he would be her shield against the darkness that lingered beyond the walls. The days after the council attack were filled with tension. The palace walls felt colder, the air heavier. Though Lord Brenner and his followers had been captured, Ethan Cole knew their defeat had not erased the danger. Queen Ilara ruled with a steady hand, yet she kept Ethan close. They had faced battle together, and the bond between them had grown into something unspoken but unbreakable. It was not only duty that kept him at her side, it was the understanding that their lives had been tied together from the moment his blood had saved hers. One morning, word reached the palace that a group of armed men had gathered near the city gates. They claimed to march in protest of the queen's rule, but scouts reported hidden weapons among them. Ethan rode out with a small force of loyal guards to meet the threat before it reached the palace. The streets were quiet as they approached, the only sound being the steady steps of horses on cobblestone. The group stood ahead, faces covered, their leaders shouting to the crowd about removing the queen. Ethan dismounted, walking forward alone. "Lay down your arms," he called. "No one here wishes to spill blood today." The leader laughed. "We are not here to talk. We are here to take what should be ours." Steel glinted as the men drew weapons. Ethan's grip tightened on his sword. The first clash was swift and brutal. Though outnumbered, Ethan fought with the precision of someone who had survived countless battles. The loyal guards joined the fight, driving the rebels back. By the time it was over, the remaining rebels had fled. Ethan stood breathing heavily, the bond with the queen sending a wave of calm through his mind. She had felt the danger and now felt his victory. When he returned to the palace, the queen met him in the great hall. She stepped down from the dais and faced him without the formality of a ruler. "You have stood for me again?" she said softly. "I will always stand for you," Ethan replied. "Not because you are the queen, but because I believe in what you are trying to build." That evening, the queen called the people of the city to the palace courtyard. Torches lit the night as she stood before the crowd. Ethan stood behind her, watching the faces of the people as she spoke. "Not long ago," she began, "I came close to losing my life on the battlefield. I was saved by a man who asked for nothing in return. Since then, he has stood between me and every danger without hesitation. His courage has kept the heart of this kingdom beating." She turned to face Ethan. "Ethan Cole, you are no longer just a soldier of the crown. From this day forward, you are my sworn protector, bound not by duty alone, but by the bond we share. Let the kingdom know your name, for it will be remembered as long as our walls stand." The crowd erupted in cheers. Ethan felt no pride in the title, only a quiet resolve. He would wear the honor not for himself, but for the people and the queen he had vowed to protect. When the ceremony ended, the queen walked beside him through the palace gardens. The moonlight cast silver across the flowers, and the night air carried the scent of roses. They spoke little, yet the silence was filled with understanding. "You have given me more than life," she said at last. "You've given me the chance to lead with hope, knowing I am not alone. And you've given me a reason to fight beyond the battlefield," Ethan answered. They stopped at the edge of the gardens, looking out over the city lights. The kingdom was still fragile, but it was alive. It had survived war, betrayal, and the greed of those who sought to tear it apart. And as long as they stood together, it would endure whatever came next. The bond between them was no longer just the memory of blood shared on a battlefield. It was the promise of two lives walking forward as one, guarding a future that would be written not in fear but in strength and trust.